All right, let me get. All righty. Well, thank you all for joining today. This is Patrick Gilster, the Director of Planning and Fund Management here at the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. Thanks for spending your hour after lunch with us. We're excited today to talk about the launch of the 2025 Highway Program Calls for Project. So this is for all our different stakeholders and applicants that plan to apply to our program. For many of you who I see on the call, you've been through many of these different types of calls for projects before with me. But for those who have not been on this, today we'll cover the program overview, our available funding, talk about different projects that are eligible. There's some exciting things this time around as compared to years past. And then the application process and materials itself, what our new evaluation criteria looks like now that our strategic plan has been updated and adopted as of last December. And then some key policy highlights just to make sure you're all aware. There's some good homework you'll all have after this to make sure you read through all of that. And then touch base on our schedule and make sure you have all the right contacts and links. So the TA's highway congestion program is really meant to focus on reducing congestion and improving throughput in safety in some of our major commute corridors in the county. Measure A dedicates 27.5% of revenue, and that's actually broken down into two specific categories under that are in the expenditure plan. Fund numbers 17.3% goes to key congested areas, and those are projects that are specifically called out in locations in the expenditure plan itself. And then 10.2% of Measure A goes to supplemental roadways. And then many of you will touch on helped provide an update to those, but they're listed projects in the expenditure plan. And many of you submitted nominations earlier this year that got adopted in June. And we created the updated candidate project list that are eligible this cycle. And then on the Measure W side, there is 22.5% of total sales tax revenue that's dedicated to the highway program. Our strategic plan further breaks that down into 21.5% just for highway projects, so actual projects on the highway system, and then gives 1% for transportation demand management program, which hopefully you all are aware of. That Sue Ellen is leading a different program on our team for that as well, and those applications are due here shortly at the end of the month. The TA has a whole host of different documents that provide input on the program guidelines for our calls for project. In 2021, we adopted the short-range highway plan and capital improvement plan that gave a 10-year outlook of the different types of projects that were underway at the time and that jurisdictions were interested in. We've kind of done light refreshes of that over the years when we keep looking at our strategic plan and what projects have come to us each cycle. Like I mentioned, we adopted the TA strategic plan 2025 to 2029 this past December. And in that created an updated evaluation criteria and program guidelines that then now kind of rule the program ahead of the short-range highway plan. And then most exciting this year, we have a lot of money that I'll touch on, but a lot of funding that's available for local arterial and Main Street multimodal congestion and safety projects that are now available if you have submitted the updated supplemental roadways candidate project list in June 2025. So we hurried to make sure we got that done so that we could launch this highway call for projects, and looking forward to a whole host of things that could get hopefully to construction and require less Caltrans approval in the next 5 years. So the most exciting part, and what everyone is probably the most interested in here, is how much money does the TA have available this year? We have quite a substantial amount of money, some rollovers from years past. So for Measure A, we have $120 million total available. It's a little bit less for the key congested areas one, because in years past, a lot of that funding has actually gone to the Redwood City 84101 project, which we're really looking forward to hoping get to construction next year. So excited for that one. And then we have a substantial amount of supplemental roadways funding at $75 million to support those local and Main Street arterial kind of projects. On the Measure W side, and these are just the strictly highway on system projects, in that they have $80 million total available. And as in the last cycle, project requests must be ready to proceed with work within 12 months of a funding award, which is helping us to keep our money moving and not having it sit on projects in our system. Some new exciting things that many of you may know from helping us be interviewed during our strategic plan update and process. We actually now have applied our geographic funding distribution targets, which originally started on our TDM program, to many of our other programs like the PedBike program and the highway program. And so these are specifically targets and not necessarily limits. And so that means that small coastal projects have 15% of the funds, mid-large projects can get 50% of the funds, and countywide significant projects can get up to 35% of the funds. How does that operationalize? That's mostly on my end, on the back end. So funding will be assigned to projects in the applicable geographic categories first, and then if there's any remaining funding in, say, countywide significance that we didn't fully use, that can be distributed to the next highest scoring project in either small coastal or mid-large. Then we kind of work our way down from there until we run out of funding. And hopefully we do get to use up all 200 million this year. We've updated our projects of countywide significance definition. So projects are eligible for consideration for this category if they meet at least 2 of the following screening criteria. Projects serve a significant amount of person throughput, inclusive of all modes. Projects serve a significant amount of inter-county traffic. Project significantly improves connections between 2 or more geographic areas of the county, and project is a priority component of a countywide or regional multi-jurisdictional effort. So many of these we'll talk through individually about your projects, but for the most part, these tend to be our larger projects, such as things like the express lanes or the Woodside Road interchange, the large El Camino Real projects, and then some of the Dumbarton access projects as well. So again, the kind of the what is eligible for our program, it depends on which measure we're talking about and which subcategory. So lots of things this year to be aware of. And so, as I mentioned at the top, lots of things to read through in the guidelines before we have some required meetings with TA staff. So on the Measure A side, like I mentioned, there are specific key congested area projects identified in that plan. If you have an ongoing project, you'll likely already know if it's designated that or not, or if not, we're happy to help on that as well. And then additional supplemental projects not included in the 2004 Transportation Expenditure Plan had to be approved through our update candidate supplemental project roadway list. And I think that's about 70 new corridors across the county that applied for that funding. On the Measure W side, eligible candidate projects will focus on the highway and interchange facilities, including 101, 280, and their respective interchanges. Eligible candidate projects can include bicycle pedestrian components or pedestrian overcrossings that can be incorporated into a larger highway interchange project. Specifically, Measure A cannot fund pedestrian overcrossings, but Measure W can. However, both measures can support bicycle pedestrian elements as long as they're not the sole focus of the project. And especially right down at the bottom, complete streets projects that focus on multimodal congestion and safety improvements are eligible, but cannot be strictly bicycle and pedestrian in nature. So this applies primarily to the candidate supplemental roadways project list as you're thinking about those. So any type of traffic congestion improvement elements and bicycle pedestrian components are eligible, but you couldn't just build a trail, for instance. So just good things to keep in mind as you think about what projects you're interested in. Our application process, many of you have been with us through this in years past, and it's not subject to change. We have a notice of intent to submit survey that's due by August 1st. This is a little more accelerated than normal, and that's intentional. So please make sure you fill that out by August 1st. We're not going to hold you to what you necessarily put in that. That just helps us actually use that to set up a Dropbox for your application submission. But new this year, we are requiring pre-submittal meetings for every project during the week of August 4th to 8th. And really, that's just a 30-minute meeting with us just to understand what you intend to apply for. Make sure you've thought through all the different guidelines, know what category you're in, and that you're making sure to fill out the right information in the application itself. Because not every section is required depending on what phase you're in. And that's called out in the application, but that'll help us figure out how much money you may be wanting to apply for, what phases, and just making sure that we're all in agreement about what should be applied for this cycle and or what could be in future cycles. Similarly to everything in years past, and this is wrong on here, but I'll update this. All the materials are posted to the CFP webpage. It's actually a fillable PDF application. I accidentally uploaded the wrong one, so that is being replaced with the PDF fillable one as we speak. So if for some reason you downloaded the Word one and you said none of these features work, like I did to myself today, that'll be good to know. So you're not going crazy. It was uploaded incorrectly by me, and we're getting that fixed. I see Amy laughing at me. At least I found it before this meeting, so that was great. The big part in there that I mentioned about all of your homework is really in these early weeks, going through the program guidelines. As I mentioned, coming out of the strategic plan update, we do have a lot of different guidelines that apply to the highway program in particular now, and especially for any projects that may be anticipated to be over $25 million. The big thing not to forget is that the cover letter needs to be provided and also includes a non-supplementation of fund statement. That means if you already dedicated funds to the project, you cannot replace them with Measure A or W funds. It has to be in addition to those. So if you have funds adopted in your capital improvement programs, that is supplementation of funds if you replace those. So making sure that you're all aware of that. Just making sure we can leverage these funds to increase our projects across the county. The biggest one is Exhibit A, the TA Strategic Plan 2025 to 2029 guidelines. That includes our overall guidelines for all programs and the one specific for the highway program that are all listed out there. And then Exhibits B and C get into the short-range highway plan projects and SIP projects, and then the Measure A supplemental roadways projects that are eligible now as well. So if you have questions about those, make sure to review those, and always I'm available if you can't come up with the answer yourself. And then Exhibit D, which is forthcoming, wasn't quite ready for the launch of the program, but we're getting it there, and we'll email it to everyone who attended this call and fills out the Notice of Intent to Submit survey. But that's updating all of our specific evaluation criteria so you can see how to get the different scores in the program guidelines document. Is the top level score you can get for each question, but it doesn't have the breakdown in there like we normally provide. So I'm still working on that, and we'll get that to you hopefully in the next 2 weeks. And then last but not least, and the most important one, the one that allows you to sign your supplemental agreements with us, is the Highway Call for Project Resolution template. We talk about this during many of our different applications, but if you can't get it adopted prior to the application deadline, we do have a deadline in the, I think by October in the actual application. But you do need to submit a draft version of that and let us know which city council or board of supervisors agenda that is on. Thank you to all those who get all of these in on time. And then for those that make sure you keep us up to date on those. So that's what allows us to know that your grant funds are secured, or that your agencies understand what the costs are, and that you're in support of the project, and that you're not supplementing funds, and that you can sign our supplemental agreement for that. Most of you already have the primary grant agreements with the Transportation Authority. So thank you to all those earlier this year who helped us get those adopted. They're hopefully working to make things a little bit quicker as we launch the first versions of those. And then all the workshop materials and recording will also be on our CFP page as well. The big one, application submittal. These are due by September 12th at 4 p.m. So each project application must be uploaded to that Dropbox that will provide once you fill out the Notice of Intent to Submit survey. It is the responsibility of each of you to confirm with staff, primarily me, that your application is in there. So please don't wait till 4 p.m. on September 12th if possible, so we can make sure to get that in there. luckily we don't have too many problems with this group, so I appreciate that. And then late or incomplete applications will not be accepted at 4 p.m. on September 12th. I hit download for the entire Dropbox, and that is what gets stored in our files for evaluation. Our evaluation criteria has changed a little bit this year, as I mentioned, with the adoption of the strategic plan. And this is the kind of part I mentioned too. There's different sections of the application for pre-environmental phases. So if you're requesting planning funds or preliminary engineering environmental clearance, or PAED, that only is certain parts of the application. So notice the effectiveness section does not need to be filled out for that. If you have details on that, it doesn't hurt your application. It helps drive home just the benefits of the project. We do have this year, equity and community engagement is its own section. Forgot the percentage mark apparently. But that replaced our old sustainability section, which kind of gets now lumped into the effectiveness portion as well. So given the size of many of these projects, so we are looking at how you have been engaging the public, what kind of support you have that is not just from your agency, things like letters of support from non-agency committees. So other groups that are supportive of your project, we're limiting them to 5 this year. So please don't kill yourselves to go get 20 of those for this. We just want to make sure that there is general community support beyond your agency for those projects, and want to understand how equity, both from a geographic perspective, kind of a place-based perspective, so all the MTC, state, disadvantaged communities criteria, and some of our local criteria apply to the project, but also how does the project actually benefit users in the area as well. So we have different equity questions that we asked this year, to make sure you look at those. And then readiness and funding leverage have been reduced to up some of the other scores. So note that in years past, we have provided the need section scores for some of the projects. Given the amount of new projects we have, it wasn't kind of fair to keep those and make some others do them. So we are baselining everything new this year. So please make sure you fill out the need portion of the application to justify individual projects. And then, as I mentioned, Exhibit D will include the full scoring breakdown that I'll email out after the NOI survey. And then for the post-environmental phases, so any request for PS&E, right-of-way, and construction has to fill out every section of the application. Pretty standard there. So some new key policy highlights that we wanted to touch base this year. I think for standard TA procedure, there's a minimum 10% match required for each phase of work requested. And I think what's most exciting to probably many of you is that Measure A and W can only fund up to 50% of a total project cost for projects of county-wide significance, but can fund up to 75% now for local projects. So can get more money with the updated strategic plan if your project is not actually a countywide significant project. And really what that is intending to do is that projects of countywide significance should compete the best for external grant funding sources at the regional, state, and federal level. So that's the way we want to make sure the local projects that can't always compete in that don't have to fill that 50% funding gap, which we, throughout the update to the strategic plan, heard from many of you that that is a hard target to fill. So hoping that this helps us reduce some of the burden on the cities and county to get some of that last funding in. Sponsors' performance on past awards will also be reviewed as part of your readiness points. Projects must remain active and meet timely use of funds and attribution guidelines. For everyone that signed the primary grant agreements, in there, you must be submitting reimbursement requests every quarter for every project that you have a funding request for. That doesn't necessarily apply to the old funding requests, but moving forward, that will apply. Otherwise, after 2 quarters of not submittal, we'll deem your project inactive and have to have meetings with either the public works director and city manager or a team to find out what's happening on those projects. So just make sure you're keeping us updated if there's reasons for that. And that, again, that triggers once your project actually begins work within that year. So it doesn't, if you're not actually starting work within the year of an award, we're not holding you to reimbursement at that point. A few other big ones we'd like to touch on for major Caltrans projects in particular. Construction needs to include all costs for landscaping and closeout. Make sure you're in there together. Sometimes folks forget to put the landscaping costs in the construction request. We don't do separate requests for landscaping. We consider it part of the construction phase. And then many of you, I think, have learned this over the years, but it's been in our guidelines kind of buried, but I just want to make sure for everyone that it's called out. Your staff time for leading these and things at the city level or the county level is eligible for reimbursement from the TA. So it's an eligible cost. Make sure you include that on top of whatever you think the consultant dollar value is as well. We do not like to do in-kind versions of this. So you include your costs here, and cash matches the way that the TA standard practice is. A new one this year that we're highlighting for many of our programs, this applies to actually every TA program. We have a new major projects advancement policy, and this really applies to any project that's projected to have a total cost over $25 million. And what this has is sponsors must present to the TA board and community advisory committee upon completing either the preliminary engineering environmental phase or equivalent Caltrans PAED phase prior to requesting final design funds to help us better highlight major TA investments for long-term support. So really making sure our CAC and our board know that these projects are what are coming up that need our major support, and that we're making sure they're highlighted in a better sense. So that way we know more publicly what's happening with why are you choosing different alternatives and things over another. And then that needs to include information along the lines of what are the project needs and benefits and the impacts that it's helping to address, and making sure that you have a realistic cost/funding plan through the rest of construction that is approved by TA staff. So that'll be working with my counterpart and myself, Jessica Manzi, our Director of Project Delivery, among Sue Ellen Atkinson, our Manager of Planning and Fund Management as well. So we'll help make sure that we're all in agreement that your fund sources that you're including on there match what grants are actually giving out. So that's, if you're putting on there, you're going to go after the state's active transportation program and expecting $100 million, we would say that's not a realistic version of what the awards are. Or helping you identify maybe some funding sources you haven't considered yet as well. So, for applicable projects this cycle, our expectation, because this is brand new, is that if you are requesting something for final design right away in construction, that you will be in attendance at the November draft program meeting to help present on some of those slides. So very brief 5 to 10 slide presentation, but we want to make sure that our board is aware of all of those major investments and that we know more about the projects. Myself and the evaluators always get to know a lot about the projects since we're reading your applications, but the elected officials in our advisory bodies are not necessarily always getting that same level of detail. So we want to make sure that they're exposed to some of those things a little bit earlier than when it goes to construction. So our schedule, so we have our call for projects that was issued last week following our TA Board of Directors meeting. The workshop obviously is today, and then the notice of intent to submit survey is August 1st. You'll have mandatory pre-submittal meetings with myself and my staff from August 4th to August 8th. Once you submit your survey, I'll actually be able to start setting those up with you as well. Project applications are due September 12th, and then through the rest of the month of September and October, we'll be evaluating those and coming to the November 6th TA Board of Directors meeting. And actually November 4th, that Tuesday prior, is the Community Advisory Committee meeting. So we do present to both the CAC and the board for those same materials. So you'll be expected, like I mentioned, if you have a project over $25 million, that's going to be requesting PSNE and or right of construction. And then we'll take the recommended proposed project program of projects, I should say, to the December 4th meeting there. And then after that, Sophia Bowie on our team will be reaching out to sign those supplemental agreements. So any questions? Many of you know how to get a hold of me already, but please feel free to email me with any questions or ask to set up a separate meeting. I'm always happy to answer questions and talk through any ideas with you. All of our materials are located on the TA's website at www.smcta.com/2025 Highway CFP. I will also show that on our main webpage, it is the first quick link on here. So El Camino Real on here this time around. So making sure that if you can't find the link on there, just go to the TA's homepage. It should be right linked on the front. For many of you who don't know, all of our calls for projects get updated under funding programs and call for projects there. But on here lists many of the same information, the schedule. That's where you'll have one of the 3 ways, I think, to find the notice of intent to submit survey link. So make sure you hit that there and we'll set those up. The application, when updated to the fillable PDF, like I had right, but sent the wrong file, will be located here. The guidelines, which includes many of those different exhibits, and then the sample resolution here as well. One of the things to note too, as we mentioned, the supplemental roadways list is in there, but just wanted to give folks an idea of those different 70 corridors that are across the county that are now eligible for the Measure A supplemental roadways category. So lots of different projects there. So looking forward to see some great projects get off the ground. In all phases of work are eligible from the TA for both the supplemental roadways category and the standard highway categories. So that is planning funds all the way through construction funds. So if you have a project on here and you haven't started and you want to do a corridor study or feasibility study and need to do engagement, definitely make sure to ask about that. Those are eligible. And then the last kind of thing, like I mentioned, your homework will be to download that program guidelines. And in here is quite an abundance of information, making sure you understand all of the different ways that the program operates, what's eligible, all of our different links. But then we'll walk you through many of the same information we're covering today, but we'll go into different depths about if you're asking for the TA to act as an implementing agency and asking for technical assistance. So whether that's through planning with Sue Ellen and I, or through some sort of project delivery phase with Jessica Manzi and her team as well. So that can help provide a lot of information there. And then ultimately, even if you request it based on our capacity, we might not be able to help. And that ultimately will be up to Peter Skinner, our executive officer of the Transportation Authority here. But we'll try to help as much as we can. So this then goes into further information, requesting multiple phases, all of that. We've moved the eligible cost information, like I mentioned, for planning, PID, all of the different phases into here. So make sure you read that as well. And then all of the different things here that apply here. I will say we are looking, I will highlight our attribution requirements. Shout out to Erica, our intern for the summer. She's helping us go through every project that we have live funding right now and understand if you are in compliance with our attribution guidelines. Then we'll be reaching out to you as well. Remember, anything funded by the TA needs to say funded in part or full by the Transportation Authority, W funds. So making sure that's called out here. And in order to be considered for an award, we're going to want to make sure all of those different things are updated that she finds. So no worry, there's no immediate penalty at all, but we want to make sure that all of those are getting updated because we want to hopefully reauthorize Measure W. I want to make sure people know where their sales tax dollars are going to make sure that, I guess I Measure W, Measure A. So wanting to make sure that we're in compliance there as well. This is also in your primary grant agreements that you comply with those as well. It goes into more detail there. As we mentioned, the full programming allocation and monitoring guidelines for every program is in there, and then the highway program is after that. And then the application, should be the fillable PDF version of that. So it should work there. Please make sure you have the right contacts sign the application for each, the sponsor agency or the implementing agency as applicable as well. So with that, I've stopped sharing and can answer any immediate questions that you might have. Yeah, Malhat.
Hi, this is Malhat from Redwood City. In the application, Patrick, I forgot if we have that option. So we do have a project that we want to add this Measure A grant. We do have another grant from MTC. We did request MTC to push the allocation timing to next year, so we are ready with the design. Can we do that when we fill the measure application, say, because this call for project is like every 4 years, right?
Great question. This one is every 2 years. So regional transit connections is the only 4-year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if we are awarded, we don't have to start immediately. Can in the funding plan we say we start like next fiscal year? Because we are not ready now, but we will be ready before the next call.
Yeah, great question. So when we refer to must be ready to start within a year from a program award, that means from the December 2025 program award, you have a year to start work. So you can start work in December 2026. So basically before the end of next year, you would need to start work. And what do we mean by start work? That can be a little bit different. It really kind of means you've released, it doesn't necessarily mean your consultant is on board yet or whatnot, but we want to know that you've either released your RFP or that there's some kind of task order that is starting to work, that it's not just a few emails being sent back and forth kind of thing. So
yeah, this is for construction. So we currently have a design consultant, but we are just collecting money for the construction. Okay, so we will discuss more in our check-in. Thank you.
I know it says Erica on there, but Noelle, I think you're next.
Day. Okay,
Noelle, do you want to
hello.
introduce yourself
Hi.
first?
Hi, I'm Noelle. I'm a summer intern at the TA with the project delivery team. Hello, that's me. I'm helping out on a CFP for a project. And I had a question. This project applied for previous funds for the previous phases. And I was wondering if we could reuse the letters of support for that. Because there's one letter of support that's on the federal level, I believe, and Carolyn and I are wondering if we could reuse that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say normally for things that are above our level here at the Transportation Authority, we'd say get new letters of support. I'm completely fine if you have existing letters of support from another application that supports the same project. So no need to bother the congressional representatives and things like that again.
Thank you.
Chanda.
Hello, thank you for this presentation. I was curious if you could send over the link for the major advancements project policy. I don't think I've looked at that, so I would appreciate that. And then
it's in the exhibit, the guidelines.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so could you talk a little bit more about you said a 5-slide presentation, and will you be advising us sort of what the expectations are kind of closer to the date?
That's correct. Yeah, for anyone who will fall under that, and we'll talk about that based on your notice of intent to submit surveys, we'll give more information on what we'll also need with your application submittal or following your application submittal.
Okay, sounds good.
You don't need to provide that right with the application. I should put it that way.
Okay, great. And then I think on the application it says like the deadline for the reso is September 12th, the same date as the application. But then I think in the guidelines it says we have a little bit of leeway. Could you just confirm or clarify what like the drop dead deadline is for the reso?
So the regular requirement should be submitted with your application. The drop dead guideline one, I think, is that October date.
Okay.
So basically we need it 2 weeks before we submit our materials for the November board meeting to confirm that we have all of the materials. And so that's generally 2 weeks ahead of that meeting. So
Okay.
Mid-October.
Thank you.
And like I said, for those folks on here too, if you can't make that deadline with the application, just make sure you submit the draft to us and let us know what board meeting or council meeting that's on. Okay, Irma.
Oh, hello, sorry. Thank you for that. I know you mentioned that the funding distributions for like small and coastal towns is 15%. So is there a limit on the number of projects and funding that a single jurisdiction can be awarded?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't highlight that in the presentation, but it is in the guidelines that are attached. You can apply for up to 3 applications per jurisdiction.
Okay. And then
Um,
is there a limit on the funding part?
This program, we do not have a minimum or maximum on the funding requests.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other big questions?
Hey, Patrick, I did have one question.
Yeah.
This is probably, we probably should be ineligible for funding because I couldn't even figure out how to put up my hand under Zoom, so I apologize. Just was wondering, could you speak a little bit to what the situation is with the Grand Boulevard Initiative? As you know, many of us, including Atherton, are invested in improvements on El Camino, and are they going to be competing for some of the 200 million in funds? And could you just speak a little bit more to what we can expect?
Yeah, so I can talk to as much as I know currently. So right now, Samtrans received a grant to get the entire corridor through the PID phase, project initiation document phase with Caltrans. The action plan is set, which will have kind of all host of alternatives for each of your jurisdictions that are going to be considered in that next phase. That should be going out to your different agencies later this fall, and then to your councils or town councils, and then will be adopted by Samtrans and the Transportation Authority towards the end of this year. Following that, Samtrans will initiate the PID phase, and that will take about a 2-year timeline. So Samtrans is not actually going to be applying this cycle for the subsequent PAED phase, and we'll wait to the next round. That being said, we do encourage any city that has not identified your own local priority on there. So that is also going to be an element needed for Grand Boulevard that we'll actually be talking more on in the next GBI workshop about how the action plan and the PID support what you all need to help us with at the local level. So if you haven't done that or you need planning or engagement work to help get you there, please make sure to talk to us. We can identify what is there. I know, Doug, you're a little different in your case that you already kind of have gone through that. Though most of the corridor should be considered there. We, for the most part, are not going to be entertaining additional requests that overlap with that process. And what I mean by that is if you're going to request the PID phase for your city, but Samtrans is already doing for it and having it paid for by an MTC grant, we don't want to duplicate costs. That being said, if you have smaller projects, like a small signal pilot project or something like that, that you are interested in the near term, that doesn't conflict with the larger project, that could be eligible this cycle. So that
Thank you.
hopefully help give a little clarity.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
No problem. All right. Seeing no other last questions. Wanted to thank you all for joining us today. And then we will have all of this information posted on our website and the TA's YouTube channel. So feel free to join us there. And make sure to submit your ACR TDM applications as well by the end of the month. So, thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Bye.
Thanks, Patrick.